"You're too dramatic for a classy event like this," my mom said, her voice dripping with that familiar condescension I'd grown up hearing. She was standing in my kitchen, arms crossed, looking at me like I was some kind of embarrassment she needed to manage. "Cousin Stephanie's wedding is going to be elegant and sophisticated. We can't have you causing a scene." I set down my coffee cup slowly, processing what she'd just said. My entire family had been invited to Stephanie's destination wedding in Napa Valley. Every single person. Except me. My name is Jennifer. I'm 27 years old, and I work as a social media manager for a boutique marketing firm here in Portland, Oregon. I've always been the black sheep of my family, the one who spoke up when things weren't fair, the one who called out hypocrisy when I saw it. Apparently that made me dramatic. "I wish them the best," I said calmly, surprising even myself with how steady my voice sounded. Inside, though, I was reeling. This wasn't just about missing a wedding. This was about being deliberately excluded from a major family event because my own mother thought I was too much trouble to bring along. Mom shifted uncomfortably, clearly expecting more of a reaction. "It's nothing personal, Jennifer. It's just that Stephanie specifically requested a drama-free celebration, and you know how you can be when you get worked up about things. How I can be. Right. Like when I'd called out my uncle for making racist comments at Christmas dinner last year, or when I'd defended my cousin Maya when the family was gossiping about her divorce. Apparently standing up for what's right made me the family troublemaker. When is it?" I asked, keeping my tone neutral. "Next weekend. It's a 3-day affair at some fancy vineyard. They're doing the whole thing properly, with welcome drinks, the ceremony, and a reception that's supposed to go until dawn." She was practically glowing with excitement about an event I wasn't invited to. "Your Aunt Helen says it's going to be featured in some wedding magazine." Of course it was. Stephanie had always been the golden child of our extended family. Beautiful, wealthy husband, picture-perfect life that everyone loved to fawn over. And now she was having the kind of wedding that would make for glossy magazine spreads, the kind where every detail was curated for maximum social media impact. "That sounds lovely," I said. "I'm sure you'll all have a wonderful time." My mom looked confused by my calm reaction. She'd clearly been bracing for tears, arguments, or some kind of dramatic outburst that would prove her point about why I couldn't be trusted at elegant family events. "You're not upset?" she asked suspiciously. "Why would I be upset? You've made it clear that my presence would somehow tarnish the event. I respect Stephanie's wishes for her special day." I picked up my phone and started scrolling through my calendar, as if I was already making plans for that weekend. The truth was, I was devastated. But I'd learned a long time ago that showing my real emotions to my family only gave them ammunition to use against me later. They wanted to see me as the dramatic, unstable one, so they could justify treating me like I was less than. My mom lingered for a few more minutes, clearly hoping I'd give her the reaction she was expecting. When I didn't, she made some excuse about needing to get to the airport to help with wedding preparations and left. As soon as she was gone, I sank onto my couch and let the weight of what had just happened hit me. My own family had decided I wasn't worthy of being included in one of the most important celebrations in recent memory. They'd had meetings, made decisions, sent out invitations, booked flights and hotel rooms, all while deliberately excluding me. I thought about all the family events I'd attended over the years, all the times I'd bitten my tongue when relatives said things that made my skin crawl, all the effort I'd put into maintaining relationships with people who clearly saw me as a liability. But as I sat there, something else started bubbling up alongside the hurt. A spark of something that felt almost dangerous. They thought I was dramatic. They thought I would cause a scene at their precious, perfect wedding. I pulled up Instagram and started scrolling through Stephanie's feed. Her engagement photos were pristine, professional shots that looked like they belonged in a bridal magazine. Her wedding hashtag was already trending among our extended family and their friends. Everything was perfectly curated, perfectly planned, perfectly designed to showcase their perfect life. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Chloe. "Want to grab drinks tonight? I have news." I smiled for the first time since my mom had dropped her bombshell. Chloe always had the best timing. She was a wedding photographer, one of the most sought-after ones on the West Coast, and she'd been working nonstop for the past few months. "Definitely," I texted back. "I have some news too." That evening, I met Chloe at our usual spot, a cozy wine bar in the Pearl District. She was practically bouncing with excitement when I arrived. "You're never going to believe what happened," she said, before I could even sit down. "I just booked the most incredible last-minute wedding, like dream venue, unlimited budget, and the couple specifically wants something that will go viral. They saw my work and hired me on the spot." "That's amazing," I said, genuinely happy for her despite my own situation. "When is it?" "Next weekend. I know it's short notice, but they had a cancellation, and they're willing to pay triple my usual rate to make it happen." She paused, studying my face. "Wait, why do you look like someone kicked your puppy?" I told her everything. About the family exclusion, about being labeled too dramatic, about missing Stephanie's perfect magazine-worthy wedding, because my own mother thought I was an embarrassment. Chloe's expression grew darker with every word. "Are you kidding me? They uninvited you from a family wedding because you have opinions and a backbone?" "I was never invited in the first place," I corrected. "They just made sure I knew I wasn't welcome." "This is unbelievable. You're the most loyal person I know. You've put up with their garbage for years, and this is how they repay you?" Chloe shook her head in disgust. "You know what? Forget them. Come with me to this wedding next weekend. It's going to be absolutely stunning." The idea of crashing someone else's wedding to avoid thinking about my family's rejection seemed both appealing and slightly pathetic, but Chloe wasn't taking no for an answer. "I'm serious," she said, leaning forward with that determined look she got when she was plotting something. "The couple specifically said they want their photographer's creative vision to shine through. They're all about authentic moments and artistic shots. Having you there as my assistant would actually be perfect." "I don't know anything about wedding photography," I protested. "You don't need to. You know about social media, you have an eye for what makes content shareable, and honestly, I could use someone to help me capture behind-the-scenes content. This couple wants full coverage, including social media content that they can use for their own platforms." The more she talked, the more intrigued I became. I'd been working in social media long enough to know what made content go viral, and wedding content was particularly powerful when done right. There was something appealing about throwing myself into someone else's celebration instead of wallowing in my family's betrayal. "Where is this wedding happening?" I asked. "Multnomah Falls. They've rented out the entire lodge, and they're doing the ceremony right by the waterfall. It's going to be absolutely magical." Chloe's eyes were sparkling with excitement. "The bride is some kind of influencer, and the groom owns a tech company. They met through mutual friends and got engaged after only 6 months, but they said they didn't want to wait to start their lives together." There was something so refreshing about that story. A couple who knew what they wanted and went after it, instead of spending years playing games and trying to impress other people. It was the complete opposite of my family's approach to everything, where appearances mattered more than authenticity. "What time is the wedding?" I asked. "Saturday afternoon, starting at 2 p.m. The whole thing is designed to take advantage of the golden hour lighting for photos. Then they're having the reception at the lodge with dancing until midnight. Saturday afternoon. The exact same time as Stephanie's ceremony in Napa Valley. While my family was sipping champagne and pretending I didn't exist, I could be capturing someone else's joy and creating content that might actually make a difference. You know what? Yes, I'll do it." The decision felt right as soon as I said it. "I'll be your assistant." Chloe practically squealed with delight. "This is going to be amazing. I'll text the couple tonight and let them know I'm bringing additional support for social media content. They're going to love it." We spent the rest of the evening planning the logistics. Chloe filled me in on her shooting style, the timeline for the day, and what kind of behind-the-scenes content might work well. She also mentioned that the bride had specifically requested that all the content be shareable immediately, since they were hoping to use their wedding as a launching pad for some kind of joint business venture. By the time we parted ways, I felt energized in a way I hadn't in weeks. Instead of spending the weekend feeling sorry for myself, I was going to be part of something creative and meaningful, something that had nothing to do with my family's drama or their opinions about who I was supposed to be. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. I researched the venue, studied trending wedding hashtags, and put together a social media strategy that could help the couple maximize their reach. I also found myself thinking less and less about Stephanie's wedding and more about the creative possibilities ahead. On Thursday evening, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Helen, Stephanie's mother. "Jennifer, honey, I heard about the wedding situation," she said, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "I want you to know that it wasn't personal. Stephanie just wants everything to be perfect, and you know how sensitive you can be about family things." Sensitive. Right. Another word for dramatic, just dressed up to sound nicer. "I understand completely," I said. "I hope she has a beautiful day." "You're being so mature about this. I have to say I'm proud of how you're handling it." Aunt Helen sounded genuinely surprised. "Maybe this will be a good learning experience for you, about how to be more flexible when it comes to family expectations." I bit back the response that immediately came to mind. Instead, I said, "I'm actually working that weekend anyway, so it all worked out for the best." "Working? On a Saturday?" "Yes, I'm helping with a wedding. Professional development opportunity." I kept my tone light and positive, giving her nothing to criticize. After I hung up, I realized something had shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I was focused on something that excited me. Something that had nothing to do with proving myself to people who'd already decided I wasn't worth including. On Friday morning, Chloe and I met at her studio to go over equipment and final details. She'd been in touch with the couple, and they were thrilled to have additional social media support. They specifically said they want their wedding to inspire other people, Chloe told me as we packed her camera gear. They're not trying to show off or prove anything. They just want to share their happiness. The contrast with my family's approach couldn't have been starker. Stephanie's wedding was all about appearance and status, about creating the perfect image for magazine spreads and social media envy. This couple wanted to share genuine joy. "Did you see the weather forecast?" Chloe asked. "It's supposed to be absolutely perfect. Sunny, 75 degrees, light breeze. The lighting by the waterfall is going to be incredible." I pulled up Instagram and glanced at the latest posts from my cousins, all of them sharing their excitement about the Napa Valley weekend. Group photos at the airport, shots of their elegant hotel, behind-the-scenes glimpses of wedding preparations. They were all using Stephanie's hashtag, creating a digital trail of their perfect family celebration. Something occurred to me then, something that made my pulse quicken with possibility. They weren't the only ones who knew how to create compelling social media content. And they weren't the only ones who had access to a beautiful wedding. I screenshot several of their posts, studying the angles, the lighting, the captions they were using. Professional habit, I told myself. But deep down, I knew it was something more. "Ready to create something amazing tomorrow?" Chloe asked, shouldering her camera bag. "More than ready," I said, and I meant it. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, exactly as the weather forecast had predicted. I woke up feeling energized and purposeful in a way I hadn't experienced in months. While my family was probably having their elegant brunch in Napa Valley, I was preparing to be part of something that felt infinitely more meaningful. Chloe picked me up at 10 a.m., and we drove out to Multnomah Falls with her car packed full of equipment. The drive gave us time to go over our strategy one more time. "I've been thinking about the social media angle," I told her as we wound through the Columbia River Gorge. "This location is already incredibly photogenic, But what if we focus on capturing the raw emotion instead of just pretty pictures? People connect with authenticity more than perfection. That's exactly what I was thinking, Chloe agreed. This couple has such genuine chemistry. I want to capture that connection, not just pose them in beautiful settings. Oh, when we arrived at the lodge, I was struck by how different the atmosphere was from what I'd expected. There were no frantic coordinators barking orders or stressed family members arguing about seating arrangements. Instead, there was a sense of calm excitement, like everyone present genuinely wanted to be there. The bride, Jasmine, was getting ready in one of the lodge's suites, with just her sister and best friend helping her. No massive bridal party, no elaborate hair and makeup team, just intimate moments with the people who mattered most to her. "You must be Jennifer," Jasmine said when Chloe introduced us. "Thank you so much for helping with this. I know it's last minute, but having someone who understands social media is exactly what we needed." She was stunning in an understated way, wearing a flowing dress that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. But what struck me most was how relaxed and happy she seemed. There was no bridezilla energy, no stress about every detail being perfect. She was simply excited to marry the person she loved. "Tell me about your vision for sharing this day," I said, pulling out my phone to take some notes. "We want people to see that love doesn't have to be complicated or expensive to be meaningful," Jasmine explained. "We planned this whole wedding in 6 weeks because we realized we were spending more time talking about getting married than actually being engaged. We want to show other couples that it's okay to prioritize your relationship over other people's expectations." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here was a couple who'd chosen authenticity over appearances, while my own family had excluded me for being too real for their perfect image. I spent the morning capturing behind-the-scenes moments as Jasmine and her small bridal party got ready. The natural light streaming through the lodge windows was perfect, and every shot felt genuine and unforced. I found myself thinking about composition and storytelling in ways I hadn't since college, when I'd briefly considered studying photography before switching to marketing. Meanwhile, Chloe was working with the groom, Oliver, and his friends as they prepared for the ceremony. From what I could see through the windows, they were having just as much fun, laughing and sharing stories, instead of stressing about whether everything looked perfect. At 1:30 p.m., we made our way down to the ceremony site by the waterfall. I'd seen Multnomah Falls dozens of times, but I'd never seen it transformed into a wedding venue. The natural beauty of the cascading water and lush greenery created a backdrop that no amount of money could buy. As guests began to arrive, I noticed how diverse and genuinely happy the crowd was. These weren't people who were there out of obligation or social expectation. They were friends and family members who clearly adored the couple and were excited to celebrate with them. I started taking candid shots of the guests, capturing their reactions as they saw the stunning ceremony setup. The natural beauty of the location combined with the intimate size of the gathering created an atmosphere that felt magical and authentic. At exactly 2 p.m., the ceremony began. Oliver stood at the altar with tears in his eyes as Jasmine walked down the aisle, not to traditional wedding march music, but to an acoustic version of the song they'd danced to on their first date. There was something so personal and meaningful about that choice. As I captured the ceremony through my camera lens, I couldn't help but think about what was happening at the exact same moment, 300 miles south. Stephanie was probably walking down her own aisle, surrounded by elaborate floral arrangements and 100 guests dressed in their finest clothes. The contrast couldn't have been starker. But what struck me most was the emotion. Jasmine and Oliver couldn't stop looking at each other, couldn't stop smiling, could barely get through their vows without tearing up. Their joy was so genuine and infectious that I found myself getting emotional behind the camera. After they kissed and were pronounced married, the guests erupted in cheers that echoed off the waterfall walls. It was pure celebration, uncomplicated by pretense or performance. I captured every moment, from the flower petals thrown in celebration to the spontaneous group hug that enveloped the newlyweds. During the cocktail hour, I started editing and posting some of the photos I'd taken. I crafted captions that highlighted the authentic emotion and natural beauty of the day, using hashtags that would reach people interested in intimate weddings and genuine love stories. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, the posts were getting hundreds of likes and comments from people who were moved by the authenticity of what they were seeing. Complete strangers were sharing the photos and talking about how refreshing it was to see a wedding focused on love instead of spectacle. "This is exactly what we hoped for," Oliver told me during the reception. "We want people to see that you don't need to spend a fortune or stress yourself out to have a meaningful wedding. You just need to focus on what really matters." As the evening wore on, the social media momentum continued to build. The photos were being shared across platforms, with people commenting about how beautiful and authentic the celebration looked. Several wedding blogs had already reached out asking about featuring the wedding. I found myself completely absorbed in the creative process, in capturing and sharing something that felt genuinely meaningful. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't thinking about my family's rejection or my own hurt feelings. I was focused on something bigger than myself, something that was bringing joy to thousands of people I'd never met. As the reception moved into full swing, with dancing under string lights and laughter echoing off the lodge walls, I realized something important had shifted. I wasn't angry about being excluded from Stephanie's wedding anymore. I was grateful. Because if I'd been in Napa Valley, sitting through another family event where I had to watch my words and tone down my personality, I never would have experienced this. I never would have been part of something so genuine and joyful. My phone buzzed with notifications as the posts continued to gain traction. But more importantly, it buzzed with a text from my mom. "Saw your posts. Looks beautiful. Call me tomorrow." I smiled and put the phone away. Tomorrow could wait. Tonight was about celebrating love and authenticity, and I wasn't going to let family drama intrude on that. Sunday morning brought a revelation that changed everything. I woke up to my phone buzzing incessantly with notifications, and when I checked the metrics on the wedding posts, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The content from Jasmine and Oliver's wedding had exploded overnight. What had started as a few hundred likes had turned into something viral. The main ceremony video I'd posted had over 50,000 views, and the engagement was climbing exponentially. Comments were pouring in from around the world, with people sharing their own stories about choosing authenticity over expectation in their relationships. But it wasn't just the numbers that caught my attention. It was the tone of the comments. People weren't just liking pretty pictures. They were genuinely moved by the story. Couples were tagging each other, saying things like, "This is what I want our wedding to be like," and "Look how happy they are without all the stress and expense." I screenshot the analytics and sent them to Chloe, who called me immediately. "Jennifer, this is insane," she said, her voice still heavy with sleep. "I've never had wedding content perform like this. My business inquiries have tripled overnight." "It's because it was real," I said, scrolling through more comments. People are hungry for authenticity. They're tired of weddings that look like magazine spreads but feel empty. As I was talking to Chloe, another call came in. It was Jasmine. "I have to call you back," I told Chloe, switching lines. "Jennifer, I don't know what you did, but our wedding is everywhere," Jasmine said, laughing with disbelief. "Oliver and I just woke up to messages from people all over the world. Wedding planners want to feature our story, and we've gotten inquiries about the business we're launching. This is beyond anything we imagined." I explained the reach and engagement we'd achieved, and how the authentic storytelling had resonated with people who were craving something real in their social media feeds. "Would it be okay if I continued sharing some of the content over the next few days?" I asked. "I think this story has legs, and it could help other couples see that there are alternatives to traditional wedding pressure." "Absolutely," Jasmine said without hesitation. "Oliver and I talked about it this morning, and we want to hire you officially. Would you be interested in managing our social media as we launch our new venture?" The offer was tempting, but I already had a full-time job. Still, the success of the wedding content had sparked something in me that I hadn't felt in years. A sense of purpose, of creating something that mattered to people. After I hung up with Jasmine, I spent some time crafting follow-up posts that would keep the momentum going. I shared behind-the-scenes moments, details about the vendors who'd made the day special, and quotes from Jasmine and Oliver about their philosophy on love and marriage. Each post performed better than the last. By noon, the wedding hashtag I'd created was trending locally, and several major wedding accounts had shared our content to their millions of followers. That's when my phone started ringing with calls from my family. The first was from my cousin Maya, who'd been at Stephanie's wedding. "Jennifer, what is this wedding you're posting about?" she asked, her voice tight with something I couldn't identify. "It's all over my feed. People keep sharing it and talking about how beautiful and authentic it is." "I helped photograph a wedding yesterday," I said simply. The couple was wonderful, and the story resonated with people. "Yesterday? But that was when Stephanie's wedding was happening. Where did you even find another wedding to go to?" There was an accusation in her voice that I didn't appreciate, as if I'd somehow manufactured this opportunity just to compete with Stephanie's big day. "My friend is a photographer and she needed assistance with social media content. It worked out perfectly since I wasn't invited to Stephanie's wedding anyway." Maya went quiet for a moment. "The posts are getting more engagement than Stephanie's wedding content. A lot more." That's when it hit me. While I'd been focused on celebrating Jasmine and Oliver's authentic love story, my family had been documenting Stephanie's elaborate celebration, and their carefully curated content about the perfect Napa Valley wedding was being completely overshadowed by our genuine, heartfelt posts from Multnomah Falls. "That's not really my concern," I said, though I could feel a spark of satisfaction. "I was just doing my job." After Maya hung up, I checked Stephanie's wedding hashtag out of curiosity. Her posts were beautiful, perfectly staged, and exactly what you'd expect from a high-end destination wedding. But the engagement was surprisingly low for the amount of money and effort that had clearly gone into the event. The comments were polite but generic, the kind of responses you get when people feel obligated to like something, but aren't genuinely moved by it. My phone rang again. This time it was my mother. "Jennifer, I need to understand what's happening," she said, skipping any pleasantries. "Your cousin's wedding posts are being overshadowed by some other wedding that happened the same day. People are commenting on Stephanie's photos, asking why her wedding wasn't as authentic as this other one they keep seeing." I could hear the frustration in her voice, the confusion about how the family's carefully planned perfect event was being upstaged by something they hadn't even known was happening. "I was working," I said, using the same calm tone I'd maintained all week. "I helped document a beautiful wedding, and people connected with the story. But people are making comparisons, Jennifer. They're saying that this other wedding looked more meaningful than Stephanie's. Some of the comments are actually criticism of how much money was spent on flowers and decorations, when this other couple had something so simple and beautiful." The irony was perfect. My family had excluded me because they thought I would cause drama at their elegant event. Instead, by simply doing good work and sharing an authentic story, I'd inadvertently created a situation where their expensive, curated celebration looked shallow by comparison. "I'm sorry people are making comparisons," I said, though I wasn't sorry at all. "That wasn't my intention." "Well, what was your intention? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you deliberately tried to upstage Stephanie's wedding." There it was, the accusation I'd been waiting for. Even when I wasn't present, even when I'd been nothing but supportive, I was still somehow the problem. "My intention was to do my job well," I said, letting a little steel creep into my voice. "I helped document a couple's special day, and I shared their story in a way that resonated with people. The fact that it happened to coincide with Stephanie's wedding is just timing. Jennifer, you need to understand how this looks. People are talking about how much more beautiful and meaningful this other wedding was. It's embarrassing for Stephanie." "Maybe the problem isn't that I shared something beautiful," I said, my patience finally starting to fray. Maybe the problem is that you're all so focused on appearances and status that you've forgotten what actually matters to people. There was silence on the line for a long moment. I can't believe you're being so callous about this, my mother finally said. Stephanie is family. You should be supporting her, not competing with her. I wasn't competing with anyone. I was excluded from her celebration, remember? You told me I was too dramatic for a classy event. So I found somewhere else to be, and I did something meaningful with my time. But now it looks like what? Like I'm capable of creating something beautiful and authentic without your permission? Like maybe the person you thought was too dramatic to include actually has value to offer? I could hear my mother's sharp intake of breath, but I wasn't done. You know what, Mom? I spent years trying to make myself smaller so you wouldn't be embarrassed by me. I watched my words, toned down my personality, and let you all treat me like I was some kind of liability. And you still decided I wasn't good enough to include in a family celebration. That's not what happened. That's exactly what happened. You decided I was too much trouble, so you excluded me. And while you were all having your perfect drama-free wedding, I was out creating something that actually touched people's hearts. Something real. The silence stretched between us, heavy with years of unresolved tension and hurt feelings. So what happens now? My mother finally asked, her voice smaller than before. Now I continue doing work that matters to me, I said. And maybe you all figure out why an amateur social media manager created content that resonated with more people than your professional, magazine-worthy celebration. I hung up before she could respond, my heart pounding with adrenaline. I'd never spoken to my mother that way before, had never directly confronted the family dynamics that had made me feel like an outsider my entire life. But instead of guilt or regret, I felt something else entirely. Liberation. The afternoon brought a cascade of calls from various family members, each with their own version of concern about the situation. By the fourth call, I'd stopped answering numbers I recognized and was letting everything go to voicemail. But I couldn't ignore the metrics. The wedding content was still climbing, now approaching 100,000 views across all platforms. Wedding planners, photographers, and venues were reaching out to both Jasmine and me, wanting to collaborate or feature the story. The hashtag had gone from local trending to national conversation starter. More importantly, the comments had evolved from simple appreciation to deeper discussion about wedding culture and what celebration should really mean. People were sharing their own stories about pressure they'd felt to have expensive, elaborate weddings that didn't reflect their values. Others were talking about how they'd chosen simple ceremonies and felt judged for it. I found myself at the center of a conversation I'd never intended to start, but one that clearly needed to happen. Around 3 p.m., Chloe arrived at my apartment with coffee and pastries, looking as overwhelmed as I felt. My phone hasn't stopped ringing, she said, settling onto my couch. I've gotten more business inquiries in one day than I usually get in a month. But I also got a very interesting call that I think you should know about. From who? A producer from a lifestyle show. They want to do a segment on authentic weddings versus traditional elaborate ones. They specifically mentioned your social media strategy and how the content went viral. I stared at her. They want to interview me? They want to interview both of us, plus Jasmine and Oliver. The angle is about how genuine emotion and authentic storytelling can be more powerful than expensive productions. Chloe paused, studying my face. But here's the thing that I think you'll find interesting. They also reached out to your cousin about featuring her wedding as the contrast example. My stomach dropped. What? Apparently, someone connected to the show saw both weddings trending and thought it would make for compelling television. The idea is to show two different approaches to wedding celebration and let viewers decide which one feels more meaningful. I could only imagine how my family was reacting to that news. Being asked to participate in a show that would essentially pit their expensive, traditional celebration against my authentic, intimate alternative would be their worst nightmare. Did Stephanie agree to participate? From what I understand, she declined. But the producers seem to think that just made the story more interesting. They're calling it the wedding that went viral while the family watched. The irony was so perfect it almost hurt. My family had excluded me to avoid drama, and their attempt to have a drama-free celebration had created the biggest drama of all. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Stephanie. We need to talk." I showed Chloe the message, and she raised her eyebrows. "Are you going to respond?" "I don't know. What could she possibly want to talk about now?" But even as I said it, I knew I was curious. Stephanie and I had never been particularly close, but we'd also never been enemies. She was 8 years older than me, and had always seemed to exist in a different sphere of the family hierarchy. I decided to call her back. "Jennifer, thank you for calling," Stephanie said when she answered. Her voice was carefully controlled, but I could hear stress underneath the politeness. "What did you want to talk about?" I wanted to understand what happened yesterday. From my perspective, I had my wedding, and it was beautiful. Then I woke up this morning to find that some other wedding is trending, and people are comparing it to mine. And not favorably. There was hurt in her voice that I hadn't expected. For all her privilege and perfection, she sounded genuinely confused about why her celebration wasn't getting the reaction she'd hoped for. "Stephanie, I wasn't trying to compete with your wedding. I didn't even know the content would take off like this. But it did take off. And now people are saying that your friend's wedding was more authentic and meaningful than mine. They're saying my wedding looked expensive but empty." I could hear her voice starting to crack. And despite everything, I felt a pang of sympathy for her. "I'm sorry people are making those comparisons," I said, and I meant it. "That wasn't my intention." "Then what was your intention? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you deliberately created something to overshadow my day." The same accusation my mother had made, but coming from Stephanie, it sounded more like confusion than anger. My intention was to help my friend document a beautiful wedding and share it in a way that would make the couple happy. The timing was coincidental. But you knew our wedding was happening. You knew the family would be posting about it. Yes, I knew. And I also knew I wasn't invited to be part of it. Stephanie went quiet for a moment. That wasn't my decision alone. Whose decision was it? The family felt like there might be conflict. "You've been so outspoken about things lately, and we wanted everything to be peaceful. So you decided to exclude me rather than address whatever conflicts you were worried about. We thought it would be easier for everyone. Easier for everyone except me." Another long pause. "I didn't think about how that would feel for you. I was so focused on having everything be perfect that I didn't consider." "I'm sorry, Jennifer. That was wrong." Her apology surprised me. I'd been prepared for defensiveness or blame, not genuine remorse. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "But I don't know what to do now. People are sharing posts about this other wedding and talking about how much better it was than mine. It's becoming a whole thing on social media." I could hear the vulnerability in her voice, and it made me think about the pressure she must have been under to create the perfect celebration. The kind of pressure that led to excluding family members who might disturb the carefully curated image. "Stephanie, can I ask you something? Did you enjoy your wedding?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, in the moment, when you were getting married, were you happy? Were you focused on Oliver and your love for him? Or were you thinking about how everything looked?" There was a long silence before she answered. "I was thinking about how everything looked," she admitted quietly. "I spent most of the day worried about whether the flowers were right, whether the photographer was getting the shots we needed, whether people were having fun. I barely remember actually getting married." My heart ached for her. She'd spent a fortune and excluded family members to create a perfect event, and she'd missed her own wedding in the process. "That's the difference," I said gently. Jasmine and Oliver were completely present for their ceremony. They were so focused on each other that everything else faded into the background. That's what people are responding to in the content. Not the location or the flowers or the budget, the genuine emotion. So what do I do now? It was such a vulnerable question, and it made me realize something important. This wasn't about competition between weddings. This was about two completely different approaches to celebrating love and the unexpected consequences of those choices. You could start by thinking about what actually matters to you, I said. Not what looks good on social media or what impresses other people. What makes you genuinely happy. And the social media situation? The internet moves fast. This will be old news in a week. But the relationships you damaged by excluding family members? Those take longer to heal. By Monday morning, the wedding content had reached numbers that felt surreal. Over 200,000 views across platforms, with shares and comments still climbing. Wedding industry publications were reaching out for interviews, and several major lifestyle brands wanted to discuss collaboration opportunities. But more importantly, I'd woken up to a voicemail from my boss at the marketing firm. "Jennifer, it's Patricia. I've been watching your personal social media over the weekend, and I'm impressed. Can you come in early today? I'd like to discuss some opportunities." I arrived at the office an hour before my usual start time to find Patricia waiting with coffee and a stack of printouts showing the analytics from the weekend. "Explain to me how you created content that outperformed accounts with millions of followers," she said, without preamble. I walked her through the strategy, the focus on authentic emotion over staged perfection, and the way we'd crafted captions that invited people into the story, rather than just showing them pretty pictures. "You've proven something I've been trying to tell clients for months," Patricia said, leaning back in her chair. "Authentic content will always outperform polished but empty content. People can sense when something is real." "It helped that the couple was genuinely happy and present," I said. "It's hard to fake that kind of emotion. But you knew how to capture it and package it in a way that resonated. That's the skill that makes the difference." She pulled out a contract from her desk drawer. "I want to offer you a promotion. Creative director for our social media division, with a focus on authentic storytelling for brand clients." The offer was generous, both in terms of salary and creative freedom. It would mean leading a team, developing strategies for major clients, and having the resources to create campaigns that actually mattered to people. "There's one condition," Patricia continued. "I want you to do a case study presentation about this weekend's success. I have 3 major clients who could benefit from this approach, and they're willing to pay premium rates for authentic content strategy." I accepted on the spot. For the first time in my career, I felt like my natural instincts and values were being recognized as assets rather than problems. The rest of the week was a whirlwind of interviews, strategy sessions, and planning for my new role. The wedding content continued to perform well, though the initial viral surge had begun to level off. More importantly, Jasmine and Oliver's business launch had been incredibly successful, with hundreds of inquiries from couples who wanted help planning authentic celebrations. On Thursday evening, my phone rang. It was my mother. "Jennifer, I've been thinking about our conversation," she said, her voice more subdued than usual. "And I owe you an apology." I stayed quiet, waiting for her to continue. "I watched some of the videos from the wedding you worked on, and I read the comments. People weren't just saying it was pretty. They were saying it made them feel something. It made them think about their own relationships and what really matters." "That was the goal," I said simply. "I also talked to Stephanie. She told me about your conversation, about how she missed her own wedding because she was so worried about appearances." My mother's voice was getting softer. "I think I did that to her. I put so much pressure on her to have the perfect celebration that she forgot to actually celebrate. It was the closest to self-reflection I'd ever heard from my mother, and it caught me off guard." "Mom, let me finish. I also realized that I did the same thing to you, but in reverse. I was so worried about you not fitting into our idea of perfect that I never saw the value you bring. The work you did this weekend proved that you understand something important about connecting with people, something the rest of us missed. I felt tears prick at my eyes, emotions I'd been holding back for days finally surfacing. I never wanted to compete with Stephanie, I said. I just wanted to be included. I know, and excluding you was wrong. Not just wrong, but stupid. You could have helped make her wedding more meaningful instead of just more expensive. We talked for another hour, really talked in a way we hadn't in years. She told me about the pressure she'd felt to have the perfect family, and how that had led her to try to control everyone's behavior instead of celebrating what made each of us unique. I told her about years of feeling like I had to minimize myself to be acceptable, and how exhausting that had been. "So what happens now?" she asked, echoing Stephanie's question from earlier in the week. "Now I do work that excites me, and hopefully, we figure out how to be a family that supports each other instead of trying to manage each other." "I'd like that," she said quietly. The following weekend, I got an unexpected call from Stephanie. "Jennifer, I have a proposition for you," she said, sounding more energetic than I'd heard her since the wedding controversy began. "What kind of proposition?" "Daniel and I have been talking, and we want to do something different. We want to have a second ceremony, a small one, just focused on us and what actually matters, and we want you to help us share that story." I was stunned. "You want to have another wedding?" "Not exactly another wedding. More like a recommitment ceremony, but done right this time. Just our immediate families, somewhere meaningful to us, focused on the actual commitment instead of the performance." "And you want me to document it?" "We want you to help us create something authentic, something that shows people it's never too late to refocus on what really matters." The project turned out to be one of the most rewarding of my career. Stephanie and Daniel's recommitment ceremony was held in the backyard where they'd had their first date, with 20 guests who truly mattered to them. The content we created together told a story about learning from mistakes, about choosing substance over style, and about the courage to start over when you realize you've lost your way. It performed even better than the original wedding content, but more importantly, it started a conversation about the pressure people feel to have perfect celebrations and the freedom that comes from choosing authenticity instead. 6 months later, I was leading a team of 5 social media strategists, working with clients who wanted to build genuine connections with their audiences instead of just impressive follower counts. The promotion had led to opportunities I never could have imagined, including speaking at conferences about authentic content creation and the power of real storytelling. But the most meaningful outcome was the change in my family relationships. We still didn't always agree, and we still had different approaches to life. But there was a new respect for what each person brought to the table. My dramatic tendencies were now seen as passion and authenticity. My willingness to speak up about problems was valued as leadership. The wedding that excluded me had ended up being the catalyst for everything that followed. By being forced to find my own path, I'd discovered work that excited me, values that guided me, and a voice that people wanted to hear. 3 months after the wedding weekend that changed everything, I was sitting in a television studio in Los Angeles, preparing for what would become the most satisfying moment of my professional life. The lifestyle show that had initially reached out to Chloe and me had evolved their concept into something much bigger. What started as a simple segment about authentic weddings had become a full episode called "When Real Goes Viral, The Wedding That Outshone the Family." I was scheduled to appear alongside Jasmine and Oliver, whose business had exploded after our content went viral. They'd launched a wedding planning service focused on intimate, meaningful celebrations, and they were already booked solid for the next 18 months. But the real twist was that Stephanie had also agreed to participate. After our successful collaboration on her recommitment ceremony, she'd become an advocate for authentic celebration, and wanted to share her story about learning from the pressure she'd felt to create the perfect image. "Are you nervous?" Chloe asked as we sat in the green room, watching the monitor that showed the studio being prepared. "Not nervous," I said, adjusting the blazer I'd chosen for the interview. "Excited. This feels like the culmination of everything that started that weekend. The past few months had been transformative in ways I never could have anticipated. My new role as creative director had exceeded all expectations, both in terms of creative fulfillment and financial success. The clients I worked with were seeing unprecedented engagement rates, and my team had developed a reputation for creating campaigns that actually moved people instead of just impressing them. More importantly, the success had given me a platform to talk about authenticity in an industry obsessed with artificial perfection. I'd spoken at 3 major marketing conferences, written articles for industry publications, and consulted with brands that wanted to connect with audiences craving genuine content. The irony wasn't lost on me that being excluded from one family event had led to opportunities I never would have discovered otherwise. Jennifer Anderson? A production assistant appeared in the doorway. We're ready for your segment. As I walked onto the set, I felt a surge of confidence that had nothing to do with nerves and everything to do with knowing that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The studio lights were bright, but the host, Maria Santos, had a warm presence that immediately put me at ease. We're here with Jennifer Anderson, the social media strategist whose wedding content went viral and sparked a national conversation about authenticity and celebration, Maria began. Jennifer, take us back to that weekend. You'd been excluded from your cousin's wedding, and instead of wallowing at home, you chose to document someone else's celebration. What was going through your mind? Honestly, I was hurt, I said, settling into the interview rhythm. Being excluded from a family event because you're considered too dramatic forces you to examine what that really means. In my case, it meant I cared too much about honesty and wasn't willing to pretend everything was perfect when it wasn't. And that quality that your family saw as problematic turned out to be exactly what audiences were craving. Exactly. People are exhausted by content that looks perfect but feels empty. When we shared Jasmine and Oliver's genuine emotions and authentic celebration, it resonated because it was real. You can't manufacture that kind of connection. Maria pulled up some of the analytics on a screen behind us, showing the viral trajectory of the wedding content compared to typical wedding posts. These numbers are extraordinary, but what's even more interesting is the conversation it started. Tell us about the response you received. The comments weren't just about the pretty pictures, I explained. People were sharing their own stories about wedding pressure, about choosing authenticity over expectation, about times when they'd felt forced to prioritize appearances over meaning. It became a community conversation about what celebration should really look like. And this success led to significant changes in your career. It did. My company recognized that I'd tapped into something important about how people want to connect with content. I was promoted to creative director, and now I work with brands that want to build genuine relationships with their audiences instead of just impressive metrics. Maria leaned forward, clearly preparing for the more personal part of the interview. But this story isn't just about professional success. It's also about family dynamics and the unexpected consequences of exclusion. How has this experience changed your relationships with the family members who excluded you? I took a breath, thinking about how to answer honestly without being vindictive. It forced all of us to examine what we really valued, I said. My family was so focused on avoiding drama that they created the biggest drama of all. But more importantly, it made us realize that our different approaches to life could be strengths instead of problems to manage. Your cousin Stephanie has actually become an advocate for authentic celebration after her own experience. She's joining us after the break to talk about what she learned from watching your content outperform her own wedding posts. As we cut to commercial, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Not because I'd gotten revenge on my family, but because I'd turned their rejection into something that benefited not just me, but thousands of people who'd been inspired by the conversation we'd started. When we returned from break, Stephanie joined us on the set. She looked polished and confident, but there was also a vulnerability in her expression that I'd never seen before. Stephanie, you had what most people would consider a dream wedding, Maria began. Destination location, unlimited budget, featured in magazines. But when your cousin's content went viral the same weekend, it sparked some difficult realizations for you. It did, Stephanie said, her voice steady. I spent months planning every detail of my wedding, and I barely remember actually getting married. I was so focused on how everything looked that I missed the whole point of the celebration. And that realization led to some significant changes. It led to Jennifer and me working together on a recommitment ceremony that was everything my original wedding wasn't. Small, intimate, focused on Daniel and our relationship instead of impressing other people. The content Jennifer created for that event was some of the most meaningful of my life. Maria turned back to me. So, the family member who was excluded for being too dramatic ended up helping create the authentic celebration that had eluded you the first time. Jennifer showed me that drama and authenticity aren't the same thing, Stephanie said. Being willing to speak honestly about what matters isn't dramatic. It's brave. The second half of the interview took an unexpected turn when Maria brought up the broader impact our story had had on the wedding industry. Jennifer, since your content went viral, we've seen a shift in how couples approach their celebrations. Wedding planners are reporting increased demand for intimate ceremonies, and social media engagement for authentic wedding content has significantly outperformed traditional luxury wedding posts. You've inadvertently started a movement. I think the movement was already happening, I said. People were already questioning why they should spend a year's salary on one day, why they should invite people who don't really support their relationships, why they should prioritize photos over presents. Our content just gave them permission to admit what they were already feeling. Stephanie, as someone who initially chose the traditional route, what would you tell couples who are feeling pressured to have elaborate celebrations? I'd tell them that the most expensive wedding I've ever attended was also the most forgettable, Stephanie said, including my own. The recommitment ceremony Jennifer helped me plan cost less than the flowers at my original wedding, but it was infinitely more meaningful because it was actually about Daniel and me. Maria pulled up social media posts showing the reach and engagement of both events. The numbers tell an interesting story. Stephanie's original wedding, which cost over $100,000 and was featured in a major magazine, received modest social media engagement. Her recommitment ceremony, which cost less than $3,000, has been shared millions of times and inspired countless couples to reconsider their own celebration plans. Because authenticity doesn't have a price tag, I added. You can't buy genuine emotion or manufacture real connection, but you can choose to prioritize what actually matters. Let's talk about the family dynamics aspect of this story, Maria said, turning to address both of us. Stephanie, the decision to exclude Jennifer from your wedding was presented as preventing drama. Instead, it created a situation where she inadvertently overshadowed your celebration. How do you look back on that decision now? Stephanie looked uncomfortable for a moment, then straightened her shoulders. It was cowardly, she said bluntly. We were so afraid of any imperfection, any moment that might not photograph well or fit our image, that we excluded someone who could have actually helped us create something meaningful. We chose the illusion of harmony over actual family connection. And Jennifer, how did being excluded affect your approach to the content you created? It freed me, I said without hesitation. I wasn't trying to maintain family peace or avoid stepping on anyone's toes. I was just focused on doing good work and sharing a beautiful story. Sometimes being pushed outside your comfort zone forces you to discover capabilities you didn't know you had. There's an interesting parallel here to the current conversation about authenticity in social media generally. Jennifer, your success suggests that audiences are craving real content over polished perfection. Absolutely. The algorithms favor engagement, but engagement comes from emotion. You can't create emotional connection with stock photo perfect content. People want to see themselves reflected in the stories brands tell, and they want to feel like they're part of something genuine rather than being sold something artificial. Maria looked directly into the camera. When we return, we'll be joined by Jasmine and Oliver, the couple whose authentic wedding celebration started this entire conversation, and we'll explore how their business built on genuine connection has revolutionized their industry. During the commercial break, Stephanie turned to me. I never properly apologized for the exclusion, she said quietly. Not just the decision, but the reasoning behind it. Calling you too dramatic was our way of avoiding looking at why we were so uncomfortable with authenticity. Thank you for saying that, I replied. But honestly, I'm grateful it happened. If I'd been at your wedding, trying to be the version of myself that wouldn't cause problems, I never would have discovered what I was actually capable of. When we returned, Jasmine and Oliver joined us, looking as genuinely happy as they had on their wedding day 6 months earlier. Jasmine and Oliver, your wedding was planned in 6 weeks, cost a fraction of what most couples spend, and yet the content documenting your celebration has been viewed millions of times. What do you think resonated so deeply with people? We weren't trying to impress anyone, Oliver said simply. We were just excited to get married and wanted to share that joy with people who mattered to us. I think that authenticity came through in every photo and video, and the business you've built since then reflects those same values. Our clients aren't interested in keeping up with wedding trends, Jasmine explained. They want celebrations that reflect their actual relationships and values. We help couples figure out what matters to them, not what looks good on social media. Jennifer, you've worked with them to develop their social media strategy. How do you apply the lessons from your viral wedding content to other businesses? The principles are the same whether you're planning a wedding or launching a product, I said. Authenticity can't be faked, but it can be showcased. Our job is to help brands and individuals identify what makes them genuinely unique, and then share that story in ways that create real connection. And that approach has been successful beyond just the wedding industry. Incredibly successful. The clients I work with now see engagement rates that are 3 to 5 times industry averages because we focus on creating content that actually means something to people. When you give audiences something real to connect with, they respond. Maria wrapped up the segment by highlighting the broader implications of our story. What started as a family exclusion has become a case study in the power of authentic content and genuine connection. Jennifer, Stephanie, Jasmine, and Oliver have shown us that sometimes the most meaningful celebrations and the most successful content come from choosing substance over style. As the cameras stopped rolling, I felt a profound sense of completion. The journey that had begun with hurt and exclusion had led to professional success, stronger family relationships, and a platform to advocate for authenticity in an industry often obsessed with artifice. But more than that, it had proven something I'd always suspected, but never had the courage to test. That being genuinely myself, even when it made others uncomfortable, was not just acceptable, but valuable. The months following the television appearance brought opportunities that exceeded even my most optimistic expectations. The episode had been viewed over 5 million times online, and my inbox was flooded with speaking requests, collaboration offers, and interview opportunities. But the moment that felt like the ultimate vindication came 8 months after the original wedding weekend, when I received a call from the biggest social media conference in the industry. Jennifer, we'd like you to deliver the keynote address at our annual summit, the event director said. Your story about authentic content creation has become required reading for our attendees, and we want you to share your insights with the entire industry. The keynote opportunity was the kind of career milestone that most people spend decades working toward. The conference drew thousands of marketing professionals, brand executives, and content creators from around the world. It was the platform I'd dreamed of having to share the message about authenticity and genuine connection. As I worked on my presentation, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The family that had excluded me for being too dramatic was now watching me address industry leaders about the value of authentic storytelling. The qualities they'd seen as problematic had become the foundation of my professional success. The irony was perfect, but what felt even better was knowing that the success wasn't just about proving them wrong. It was about proving that authenticity and genuine emotion could compete with and outperform the polished perfection that dominated social media. 2 weeks before the conference, I had lunch with my mother in Portland. Our relationship had continued to evolve since our conversation after the viral wedding weekend, and she'd become one of my strongest supporters. I've been thinking about that conversation we had right after Stephanie's wedding, she said as we sat in the restaurant where I'd first told Chloe about being excluded. "When I accused you of trying to upstage the family celebration." "That feels like a lifetime ago," I said. I was so focused on protecting the image of perfect family harmony that I couldn't see how harmful that actually was. Not just to you, but to all of us. We were performing family instead of actually being one. But look what came from it. Stephanie and I have a better relationship now than we ever did when we were trying to avoid conflict. And you and I are actually talking about real things instead of just managing each other's reactions. That's true. But I still regret the hurt we caused. Watching you give that keynote speech next week, knowing that your success came from the qualities we tried to suppress, feels like poetic justice. It feels like coming full circle, I agreed. The day of the keynote arrived, and I stood backstage at the San Diego Convention Center, looking out at an audience of 3,000 industry professionals. Instead of nerves, I felt a deep sense of purpose. This was the moment to share everything I'd learned about the power of authenticity, not just as a marketing strategy, but as a way of connecting with people who were hungry for something real. 18 months ago, I was excluded from a family wedding because I was considered too dramatic for an elegant celebration. I began, my voice carrying clearly through the auditorium. Today, I want to talk about how that exclusion led to the most successful content I've ever created, and what it taught me about what audiences actually want from the brands and people they choose to follow. I walked the audience through the entire story, from the hurt of being left out to the decision to help document Jasmine and Oliver's authentic celebration, to the viral success that followed. But more importantly, I talked about the principles that had driven that success. Authenticity isn't just a buzzword, I explained. It's a strategy that works because it taps into what people actually crave from their media consumption. They want to feel connected to something real, not impressed by something artificial. I shared case studies from my clients, showing how authentic content consistently outperformed polished but empty campaigns. I talked about the wedding industry's shift toward intimate celebrations, the rise of brands built on genuine values rather than aspirational lifestyles, and the increasing consumer demand for transparency and honesty. The family that excluded me thought I was too dramatic because I cared too much about honesty over harmony, I continued. What they didn't realize was that audiences are desperate for that same honesty. They're tired of being sold perfection that doesn't exist. They want to see real emotion, genuine connection, and authentic experiences they can relate to. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The audience was engaged in a way I'd rarely seen at industry conferences, asking thoughtful questions about implementation strategies, measurement techniques, and the courage required to choose authenticity over artificial polish. During the Q&A session, a young woman stood up and said, "Your story about being excluded resonates with me because I've always felt pressure to tone down my personality to fit into corporate environments. How do you maintain authenticity while still being professional?" "The key is understanding that authenticity and professionalism aren't opposites," I replied. "You can be genuine while still being appropriate for your environment. The goal isn't to share every personal detail or eliminate all boundaries. It's to bring your real values, genuine enthusiasm, and honest perspective to your work." Another audience member asked about measuring the success of authentic content beyond traditional metrics. "Engagement quality matters more than engagement quantity," I explained. 1,000 comments from people who are genuinely moved by your content will always be more valuable than 10,000 generic likes. Look for responses that indicate real connection. People sharing personal stories, asking meaningful questions, or taking action based on your content. As the session concluded, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with career advancement and everything to do with purpose. I'd taken the pain of family rejection and transformed it into a message that was helping other people find the courage to be authentic in their professional lives. The standing ovation that followed felt like validation, not just of my professional expertise, but of the choice to turn exclusion into empowerment, hurt into helping others, and rejection into a platform for positive change. 6 months later, my family gathered for my grandmother's 80th birthday celebration. But this time, the gathering felt completely different. Instead of performing perfect family dynamics, we were actually enjoying each other's company. Instead of managing everyone's reactions to avoid conflict, we were having genuine conversations about our lives and experiences. During the party, Stephanie pulled me aside. "I've been thinking about something," she said. "Do you remember what you told me after my wedding? About how the internet moves fast, but relationships take longer to heal." "I remember. I think you were wrong about the first part. Your story hasn't been forgotten. If anything, it's become more influential over time. You've created something lasting." Looking around at my family, all of whom had learned to appreciate authenticity over artificial harmony, I realized she was right. The viral wedding content had been just the beginning. The real transformation had been in how we all approached relationships, both personal and professional, with a commitment to genuine connection over perfect appearances. The dramatic family member who had been excluded for caring too much about honesty had become the person who helped everyone else discover the value of authenticity. The rejection that had felt like an ending had actually been the beginning of everything that mattered. The family members who had orchestrated my exclusion faced consequences that extended far beyond social media embarrassment. My mother spent months in therapy, working through the realization that her pursuit of perfect appearances had damaged her relationships with her children. Stephanie's first marriage struggled under the weight of unmet expectations and artificial pressures, leading to a separation that forced both her and Daniel to examine what they actually wanted from their partnership. The extended family members who had participated in the exclusion found themselves gradually sidelined from meaningful family gatherings as the rest of us gravitated toward more authentic connections. Their commitment to maintaining surface-level harmony had left them ill-equipped to handle the deeper relationships that emerged when we stopped performing for each other and started being genuine. As I sit in my home office today, looking at the wall of awards and speaking opportunities that grew from that painful weekend of exclusion, I'm struck by how perfectly everything worked out. The family that thought I was too dramatic to include in their celebration gave me exactly what I needed: the freedom to discover what I was truly capable of when I stopped trying to make myself smaller to fit their expectations. Sometimes the greatest gift people can give you is their rejection, because it forces you to build something better than what they were offering in the first place.